Hello and welcome to this walkthrough, how to play of the party game Cash and Guns. And for those that are watching this video after my new game Agent Under Fire walkthrough, this isn't the quote-unquote big project that I was talking about at the end of the last video in that series, although it's still somewhat special in a way. So by now I know what some people are thinking. God, your videos are like so much higher resolution, which granted isn't hard given my previous series. Subtle self-promotion aside though, no doubt quite a few of you are actually wondering like why a non-video game video? Well, since this is my 100th video, technically speaking, on YouTube, I felt that I'd do something a little bit different. So in addition to playing and occasionally recording video games, I also like to play board games in most shapes and forms, all the way from the heavy Euro games to the party games and everything in between, depending on the occasion. And after a quick search online, I was surprised to see that despite a lot of videos being posted about this game, there was kind of a distinct lack of an instruction manual of sorts, out with the ones that actually come with the game, of course. So basically that's why I'm here, so that by the end of this video I've done hopefully a somewhat good job of showing the components and explaining the rules and showing a few sample turns just so you can kind of see how the game flows.
Hey, just forget about it.
So let's start with the components, and this is everything that comes with a copy of the base game, with the exclusion of one key thing, which kind of bumps this game up a bit in terms of like how fun it is to play basically, but I'll get to that shortly. There is a Yakuza expansion for the game that I won't actually be covering in this video, since it's just more weapons and cards to the best of my understanding, so you can play with more players. But I haven't actually played it before, so I'm probably not the best person to talk about it at this point, even though it might be fairly self-explanatory for me. It's not really the point of this video, so just leave it at that. So let's start with these character chits here, but before I do I just want to commend Repos Productions for the components, specifically the actual cardboard pieces themselves, since these might be the thickest and most durable pieces of cardboard I've ever seen, and this is coming from someone that plays quite a lot of board games. I don't know if it's going to come across on the video here, but if you like compare the thickness of these chits compared to like something like a tile from what do you call it, Puerto Rico, hopefully it should be coming across. It's like easily, from looking at it here, it's about at least twice as thick. So you could definitely be sure that if you do get this game, these things are like definitely going to take quite a beating before they wear out. Of course, if you're going to like absolutely snap them in half, then they won't last too long, but for general wear and tear they should last for quite a long time. But anyway, back to the components themselves. As I was saying, these are basically the character chits that you have here, and these are basically just to denote, like, you get one of these for like each player, and this basically just tells you who like you're going to be playing as. They don't have any like different abilities or anything like that. It's purely just a avatar of sorts. And as I was showing earlier, you basically get these character stands. Now, one thing just quickly to note here, I don't really like when you're like forcing these in. Like, it'll basically is nice and durable and they'll stand up, and this is basically, I'll be getting to this later, but it's nice and durable for like standing up, although I'm not a huge fan, again not sure if it'll come out, but not a huge fan of how it like basically leaves little teeth marks at the bottom. I think they were just maybe a little bit too tight when they were like creating these, with like trying to force them in and stuff like that, but apart from that, it's very durable. And these are the banknotes that players are going to be negotiating over, but again I'll get to like how that comes about later on. And as you can see here, we basically have three denominations. There is a $5,000 token, a $10,000 token, and a $20,000 token. And these are the shame and wound tokens, and basically players will receive these if they like back down from a negotiation, or if they decide to stay in and get shot as a result, they'll basically receive these tokens depending on how many times each of those things happened. I'll just get a quick close-up of each of the tokens. This one's basically your wound tokens, just like your standard plaster, although if you were to get shot, obviously you'd need a bit more than a plaster to do that. And you've got basically your shame token here, but again, like I said, I'll get back to those later. And these are basically the player cards that everyone's going to be using. They don't all have the same backing, as you can basically see here. Each player will get a set of cards that are corresponding to like the character avatar that they chose earlier. And the cards are basically double-sided, so if you flip them over, you'll basically see the other side of the 8 cards, and this is like the important side, obviously. Each player will get 5 of these click cards. Each player will receive 2 bang cards, and each player will receive a bang 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 card. As silly as it sounds, there is actually a reason why they're called this way, and again, I'll be coming back to this shortly. And included with the game is also a quick reference card, which basically, see if I can get the angle here, basically goes through all the different steps associated with the game, but again, I'll be going through like each of these as we get to them. So there was one thing that I wanted to point out right at the start of the video, and I've been basically saving it for this moment. We've had the cash part of the game, all that we're missing now is the guns, and ta-da! Foam guns, and this is what I feel takes this game just up a little bit from where it would usually be. And I mean, who wants to like use like boring old fingers when you can like actually hold like a fake foam gun in your hands? It just, there's something about pointing it at someone. It really, I don't know, it really elevates the game a little bit for me. And it's worth noting the actual guns themselves are basically just 3 layers of the same foam. So if you were to find like some equivalent foam, you could potentially make these yourself if you have like the right kind of glue to hold it all together. So if you feel like, you know, increasing your chances and basically going dual wielding and stuff like that, then it's your prerogative, I suppose. Next, I'll talk about the setup for the game.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
First, each player must decide what character they want to play as. Again, this is purely cosmetic at this point. Next, each player will receive a set of cards corresponding to which character they chose at. And again, I should point out these are basically sleeved at the moment. They don't actually, they come just as normal, and you basically, I just decided to like sleeve them because they're going to go through quite a bit of wear and tear. You don't want greasy fingers or anything, or certainly I don't anyway. And again, each of these will basically contain a set of like bang bang cards and click cards and stuff like that, but again, we'll get to that later. Next, take all the banknotes and turn them face over and shuffle them really well so that all the denominations are basically mixed in together, because this is basically how we're going to get a bit of randomness from round to round, so we'll make sure that they're really well shuffled. Once all the banknotes have been shuffled, you'll want to split them into 5 equal piles. Now, there are 15 $5,000 tokens, there are 15 $10,000 tokens, and there are 10 $20,000 tokens, so that makes a total of 40 tokens across the entire game. So you'll basically want to make sure if you have 5 equal piles, then you should have at least, or you should have 8 notes in each pile. If you don't, then you need to redistribute them again until they're completely even. Next, you want to take the wound and the shame tokens from the bag and basically separate them out if they've been mixed at all. And you want to put them in a somewhat easily accessible location so that every player can basically take them if they need them. As with most games that have like fiddly tokens, I prefer to use bowls because it's nice and easy to just dump them into the bowls here. You don't have to like worry about them spilling everywhere and then you've got to go and pick them up and stuff like that. So I prefer bowls if you have them, of course. And next, basically hand each player their weapon of choice. And then finally, just place the quick reference card in the middle so that everyone can see it. I suppose you could make copies of it and then hand one to each player if you want, it's up to you. And the final thing that has to be done for the game is to basically decide who is going to start as the Godfather for that round. For the first turn, whether it's by dice or age or rock, paper, scissors or closest ties to the mob. And now you are ready to begin. So Cash and Guns is basically made up of 8 rounds, and each of those rounds contain 8 phases. I'll basically put it up on the screen so it makes it a bit easier to see. And the entire point of cash and guns is to basically get away with as much money as possible. Each player is a gangster. Everyone has just committed a robbery in a bank and they're making it back to the warehouse, and it's time to split the loot. But obviously, things don't quite go according to plan, and you have to basically negotiate, again, air quotes, with the other players to basically split the loot as best as you can. Now, of course, you could start to question the logic of it all. It's like, well, if you're going to shoot one player and then they magically, like, they come back in for the next round, they're not actually taken out. But it's a game, don't question it, just go with it. I've found it's easier just to go with it that way. So that's the aim. The overall goal, the end game, is basically after the 8th round, any players that are still alive by the end of the game, whoever has the most money, like whoever basically has collected the most of these banknotes, just the highest cash amount overall, and is still alive at the end of the game, wins the game. And if there are a certain number of players that are alive at the end and they still have the same amount of money, then it's basically the player with the fewest shame tokens near the end, because I would assume that means that you were the bravest out of the lot of them, therefore you deserve the more money more than others. Again, not going to question the actual rules of it, just go with it, I suppose. And if there's still a tie at the end, then I guess, well, whoever has the quickest real trigger finger will win the game, I guess. So let's basically start with each of the phases that constitute a round. During the first phase, whoever was deemed to be the Godfather previously basically starts off and they turn over one banknote from the top of each pile. Sorry. And once they've turned it up, basically everyone can look at these and they can quickly see what the total amount that everyone is playing for. So in this case, we have 5,000, 10,000, another 5,000, a 20,000, and a 5,000. So that would make $20, $40, $45,000 for this entire lot here. Quite small comparatively, considering that there's very few 20s and 10s in this particular mix, and there's quite a lot of 5,000. So quite a low amount, relatively speaking. In phase 2, once everyone has had enough time to see the total amount of money available, then the banter can begin. And alliances are going to be forming, they're going to be breaking all the time, and there'll be, confrontations that have to be resolved, and it's like, oh, well, you shot at me the last time, and like I'm not going to help you this time, that kind of stuff. After this, each player then picks one card from his hand and places it down in front of them. So say I was playing as Mr. Black here. Hopefully that comes across in the video. I would basically look through my hands and I would basically see what card that I want to play. And let's just say I'm not really interested in losing this one. There's better amounts that are going to be coming. So I'll basically play this card and I'll put it face down in front of me, and each player would do a similar thing. Note that the rules for when everyone has to play their cards is somewhat flexible. It doesn't actually state it within the official rules. It can be time based, so if you want to say, okay, everyone has 5 seconds to put this down, or the Godfather for that round can basically call the vote and says, okay, everyone place their card down now, and like no more discussions. Personally, I prefer the latter, basically the Godfather deciding when everyone has to put their cards down, and I couple that with shifting the Godfather role to the next player and the next player, or potentially giving it to the player with the lowest amount of money as a somewhat balancing mechanic. Although I haven't actually tried this myself, so I can't really comment on how robust it is or how good it would be in a real life situation, for the game at least. As we enter phase 3, the Godfather counts up or down from 3. I prefer going up because it definitive. There's no 3, 2, 1, then go, or 3, 2, 1. On 1, it basically removes that. If you go 1, 2, and then everyone goes on 3, I find that to be the best way to go about it. And on 3, at the end, every player raises their gun at another player. So basically, you could have one person that's aiming straight across, or they could be aiming there, and this is basically going to be going back and forth all the way around. I've only got one pair of hands, unfortunately, so you're kind of just going to have to make, do with your imagination and stuff like that. Plus, it's quite a small table that I'm doing this on, so I don't have a lot of space to work with. At this point, it should also be noted that every player, before they raise their gun, before they raise their gun, they should already know who they're targeting beforehand. And if a player hesitates for too long, so if they basically wait for everyone else to make their move, and then they say, okay, he's aiming at him, that it would help me if I aimed at him also, and basically hesitates too long, they basically are removed from that round. So they have to put their gun down, and then they have to lower their character stand, and they basically discard the card that they have, and that just goes away. So if you hesitate too long, or you're waiting to see what happens, you're going to be removed from that round. So you want to do it fairly quickly. Next is phase 4, or as the game calls it, cojones. Seriously. So first off, every player looks at every other player and basically sees who is aiming at them, and of course every other player will do it. At this point, more banter is deployed, and every player that is being aimed at negotiates with their attackers in a group-like fashion. Obviously this is more important if two people are aiming straight at each other. They can basically talk it out from there rather than like one person being attacked from just another person. During this phase, each player has the right to withdraw their gun and basically step out of that round. So if they're aiming and they don't like the way things are going, they can basically just raise their or lower their gun and place it to the side. So this person can no longer be shot. So if I didn't like the way things were going, I'd basically just take my character stand and place him face down in front of me. And this is basically just a quick visual reference to make, so you can see who is basically in each round and who's like still available to be like shot at or not. Once you've lowered your stand and you've basically put down your gun, you receive 1 shame token. I should probably point out, you'll probably see the flashing light. This is basically the cop in the mafia version of this game. I won't really cover it because I don't think it adds that much to the game, but it's just to know it's a double-sided token, but we're only interested in the shame tokens. So I would basically put that next to me, and that basically just tells me that I've like basically backed out of one round, and it is of course like possible over multiple rounds to have multiple tokens. So if a player withdraws from a negotiation, they can no longer be shot, because there's honor among thieves and all that, I suppose. After negotiations having concluded in phase 4, and let's just say for the sake of time and example that I'm the only one that decides to withdraw, phase 5 begins, and players that have bang 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 cards turn them over. So let's say that this is the situation as it currently stands near the end of round 4 or phase 4. I've basically withdrawn from this round of negotiations. Tino here, he was basically pointing his gun at me. Now obviously since no one else, no it doesn't look it, but these are basically pointing at each other. Since Tino was pointing at me and I've decided to withdraw, and it's kind of pointless him staying in because I already can't contend for it anyway, that's why I've withdrawn. So basically he would take his gun and lower it. He wouldn't put down his stand because he hasn't withdrawn from the actual game, or he hasn't withdrawn from this round, I should say. So he's safe, like no one is shooting at him, and basically the only person that he was targeting is basically withdrawn, so he's guaranteed to get this split of the cash here regardless of what happens. And at the start of phase 5, everyone turns over who has them bang 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 cards. That's the 3 bang cards, and it just so happens that we have one here. So at this point, the reason that there's a differentiation between the bang 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 and the bang cards is that basically anyone that plays a bang 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 card gets the draw on everyone else, and they're quicker off the draw than everyone else, and they basically get their shot in before they can even have the chance to respond. So in this case, El Toro here, he's basically going to get shot regardless of what has happened. Igor was just too quick off the draw for him this round, so El Toro here, he basically gets hit, and he basically receives a win token, and then he would place that to the side there. Note that it is possible for 2 players to both play bang 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 cards at the same time, and in that case, if El Toro was to have played one, Igor would have received a win token as well. But as it turns out, he didn't back down, and it's actually cost him. He's decided to just play a click card, And this basically, as it would imply from the sound, basically the gun was empty and there was no shots fired from that person. So basically that goes there and the gun was completely empty. So basically Igor here wouldn't take any wound tokens because simply he wasn't shot. And I forget to say here that even if El Toro had actually played a bang card, it would have been superseded by Igor's bang 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 card anyway. That's basically the power that they get compared to like the normal bang cards, is that they supersede everything, which is why there's only one of them within the actual deck of 8 that you get at the start of the game. So anyone that does get hit or is victim to the bang 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 card, basically they discard their bullet card regardless of what it is, if it's a click card or a bang card or whoever they were actually aiming at. They basically take their card and they put it like face down without revealing it if they choose to. They can turn it over if they want, but this gives other players information if other people are good at card counting and stuff like that. So they basically discard that card and they take their character stand and they basically put it face down to denote that they've been hit, and they take a wound marker as they would do with like being hit by a bang card. And then this basically leads into phase 6, which is just after phase 5 obviously, where the rest of the cards get revealed and they get resolved. Again, once you like reveal the cards and it's the click cards and the bang cards, any player that is victim to a bang card basically pushes his character stand down and takes a wound marker. If two players are aiming at each other and they both play a bang card, they will both get their shots off at each other and they will both have to put their characters down and both take a wound marker. And note that during both of these phases, like 5 and 6, if several players shoot at the same person, then as you would expect, they must take however many wound markers, like equivalent to the number of bullets that were shot at them. So basically, if two different people aimed at the same person and both of those players played bang cards or some variation, then the person who was victim to that would receive 2 wound markers because 2 different people had gotten shots at that person. And then once all of this is done, all the cards are discarded face down, and then the next phase begins. And that's basically all the stuff that happens in phase 6. You're just turning over the remainder of the cards and basically everyone's showing what they had. Once all the cards are resolved and wound and shame tokens have been distributed accordingly based on what happened within the actual round itself, if a player has received 3 wound tokens, so basically if they have 3 of these by the end of this round, then he or she is taken out from the game. If the base version of the game is played. There are superpowers that allow you to stay in for one more round if you have the correct card. I'll talk about those later towards the end. Let's cover the base version first and then I'll get back to those. But for the base version at least, if one person receives 3 wound tokens, they're out of it. And finally, after all of this is done, all remaining players split the money for that round evenly. If you withdrew from the round like I done, you can't receive any share of this money here. It's only players that are still alive and were in contention with each other. Those are the only players that can receive money for that round. I have to emphasize that the money is split evenly here. There's no changing out or trading with the bank or the stockpile or any of these here, or there's no cutting the cutting the banknotes in half or anything like that, or anything crazy. Unless you're cool with that, of course, then in which case go nuts, but I like to keep my components in one piece. If the money can't be split evenly as is, then the total amount in the middle is reduced until it can be, with any remainder left to the side and carried forward to the next round. So because the money can't be split even, or because the money has to be split evenly and it can't be reduced or changed or anything like that, this is how money would be distributed for this round. Each player can receive a $5,000 banknote. However, the $10,000 and the $20,000 can't be split. They can't be reduced without changing them. We're not allowed to do that. So the $30,000 that are here gets carried forward to the next round, in addition to the 5 that get turned over at the start of that round. So there's an extra $30,000 that's going to be carrying forward, which is quite nice. Once all the banknotes have been distributed, everyone discards their bullet cards into a pile face down if they weren't played or they just get rid of them. And you then repeat this another 7 times, and whoever is still alive at the end with the most money at the end is declared the winner. Cool, so hopefully I've done a somewhat good job in explaining the rules of the game. I've tried to keep the video quite short because with most of these video explanations on the net, I don't really want to make it like a massive 25-minute game because it's really not that complicated, to be honest. It doesn't really warrant a massive amount of time, basically. Not because it's a bad game, of course, but just because it's really not that complicated with the rules. And as you can see here, I've basically laid out the 10 superpower cards that can be played with the superpower variation. And here are the 10 superpowers. Again, I use air quotes because they're not really. They're just the superpowers themselves only really change the rules. They slightly tweak the mechanics that are within the game. The superpower variant within the official rules basically say that it's only really recommended for people that are familiar, I should say, with the base rules. Like if you've played the game before, and I really only think once you've played the game once, since there's only 8 rounds, this is quite a quick game. Once you've played one full game and you know the mechanics and everything that's happening, you should be able to cope with this edition. It does say that only 1 to 6. Oh, making a mess of the cards here. They say that you should only really use 1 to 6 for your first playthrough, although to be honest, unless it's a balancing issue, or what they feel is a balancing issue, I've never really had problems playing with all 10, mixing and matching different combinations between the 4 to 6 players that can play this game. So what I'll do is I'll basically just talk about each of these cards individually, and I'll just quickly scan through them and just tell you what they are, and then I'll basically just tell you how to implement them into the game, and then that's pretty much this video done. So first off is number 1, which is basically 6 feet under. Now, as this card, if you pick this card, you're a shareholder of the Undertakers for this game that exist within this world here, and basically for every dead player at the end of the game, so for each player that gets killed, basically you receive an extra 10,000. It doesn't matter if you killed them or someone else killed them. Each dead player at the end of the game gets you 10,000. So you're going to want to hang off probably until the very end and then quickly see if you can manipulate the other people to try and take out as many people as possible, because you'll get extra money. Of course, if you're the only player left at the end of the game alive, then you automatically win because you're the only player that's left alive. Next is the Unbreakable, number 2. And as I was talking about earlier, this basically just gives you an extra wound token that you can receive before you're killed. So instead of the requisite 3 and you're dead, this one basically gives you an extra wound token. This is basically pulled out when you receive your 3rd wound token. You would have this face down in front of you and you basically say, "Aha, I am unbreakable." Obviously you don't have to say that, but you would basically show this card to everyone and then they groan because it's "Oh no, we thought we killed you," and etc. 4 wound tokens, and then that's you killed basically for this card here. So the 3rd card is basically you don't need it anymore. And this might be a bit unbalancing for the game, because basically what happens is the first player that gets killed, you basically receive their gun and their cards as well. So you could basically, that basically gives you 2 guns, and you can basically aim at different people or the same person if you really want to get them killed. There's no basic limit as to the number of cards that you can have. So basically, if everyone decides to gang up on the first person in the first round and they get taken out immediately, you just basically show up this card and say, "Ha, all your stuff is mine now. All your cards belong to us." So basically, you take all their stuff, and then you'll have 2 separate piles of cards in front of you, and you basically play 1 card for each gun. And then, just like the base rules, if you have a bang bang card or bang 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 card in one, and you've got a click in the other, the phase 5 stuff happens first, and you turn or the phase 5 stuff happens first, and you turn that card over. Everything else gets resolved, and then you turn over the other card. It plays just as normal, except you're having to make 2 decisions now instead of 1. Next up is number 4, Dragon Skin. Now this is quite interesting because if you piss off, I suppose, a lot of people and they decide to shoot at you multiple times, regardless of how many bullet wounds you receive or you would receive. So say in this example here, if you were to receive 4 wound tokens in a single round because you'd really annoyed quite a lot of people, if you play this card after all of that has happened, it basically just converts it into 1, so you only take 1 instead of how many you would usually take. So this can be quite a lifesaver. However, as an added bonus, if you don't play this card, you receive an extra 10,000 at the end. So you've basically got to weigh up whether or not you want to really stay in for a round and get like quite a high loot from a particular round, or if you're playing it nice and cool and you just want to like make some easy money at the end by not using this. But it can definitely come in handy if you play it at the right time. So next up, number 5 is the Insane. Now, as you can quite clearly see, this is a picture of a grenade. So this really happens during the first 3 phases of the round. So basically, once you're aiming your gun at everyone, you basically turn this card over. If you want, it's not mandatory. You basically turn this over and you basically show that you're holding a grenade, and then obviously everyone panics and they go, ah, right, we probably shouldn't shoot him, cause if you receive even just 1 wound token, you basically drop the grenade in the negotiating area, and everyone that is still in that round of negotiation at the end, they get the splash damage from the grenade as well. So each player that's still in basically receives a wound token as well. So it can be quite useful if someone's on 2 wound tokens and you want to take them out but they're not willing to budge. Like, it might be a good bargaining chip to get, like, to force them to withdraw, because they obviously don't want to get that 3rd wound token and die. Unless, of course, they've got the Unbreakable or something like that. This is really why I prefer like adding on the Superpower variant, like whenever I can, because it really, like, I feel adds another level to the game aside from like the usual negotiating stuff. So basically 6 and 7, the Kid and the Cunning, are related to each other in a way, so I'll basically just cover them both at the same time. The Kid, number 6, basically allows you to pick your target after everyone else has picked their target. So if you have like a lot of people that are aiming at each other, you basically play this card, and instead of being taken out for that round as you usually would, like due to hesitation and stuff like that, you basically play the Kid card, and then you can basically survey the situation and then decide who you want to target. So the Cunning is kind of similar to the Kid, but there's a difference. Whereas with the Kid you can basically decide who you want to aim at after everyone else, the Cunning is similar, but it plays with a card instead of a gun. So basically at the end of phase 3, when everyone has aimed at each other, you can basically decide what you want to do, play the Cunning card, and then that allows you to pick your bullet card once you've seen who is aiming at who. Now, the reason that both of these are tied is that the Cunning must make his decision after the Kid. If the Kid card is played, the Kid must decide who he wants to aim at first, and then once that's resolved, the Cunning can then play his or her card, and then he can basically decide what bullet card he wants to play. Next up is number 8, Super Coward. This is nice and easy. For every shame token that you receive throughout the entire game, you get an extra $5,000. You're obviously not going to want to like withdraw from every round, since there's only 8 rounds. You could only possibly achieve 40,000 using that method, so you're going to want to stay in some rounds, but there's really no point in like taking an extra wound token that you don't really need to if you can get an extra, like an easy 5,000 for withdrawing basically. Number 9, the Specialist. That's also quite easy, as you can see here. It might be coming through in the camera. There's basically a bang 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 card times 2. So basically that, as you would think, basically means whenever you've played your bang 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 card, you can basically turn over the Specialist card here, and then that basically lets you take your bang 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 card back into your hand, and then that allows you to play it at a later point in time. That can be quite powerful if obviously you play it at the right time. And finally, number 10, It Doesn't Even Hurt. As the icons are hopefully coming across on the screen here, basically even if you receive a wound token or a shame token, and you would ordinarily be taken out whether you've withdrawn or you basically got hit and like you wouldn't be able to fire back basically, regardless of whether both of these things, one of these things happened, you still get a share of the loot at the end. During phase 7, when everyone like goes to split the loot and everyone that's still in would basically take an equal share, you basically turn this card over and you say, okay, I want some of that as well, please. And then everyone has to then split the loot with one extra player than they ordinarily would. So it doesn't even hurt, number 10. Quite useful, again, if you play it in the right situation. And finally, the only thing that I really want to just say with all of these things here is basically if there's not a continuing effect like the super coward here that gets 5,000 for every wound token, each of these superpower things where dragon skin or the specialist, for example, and it doesn't even hurt, you only get to play this power once. So you have to really make it count if you have one of these ones that you can only use once. And as soon as you've used that power, you basically obviously just discard it, and then that's it used for the rest of the game. And basically when you're dealing out the rest of the cards, once you're setting up the game as I've talked about already, you basically just fan out all of these cards, and then you just get each player to pick one, and then they'll just basically pick one out and they'll keep it hidden from them. So for example, I got the super coward this time, so I would keep that hidden face down in front of me, and I wouldn't tell anyone obviously, because that would skew the game, and they might try and take you out early if you have a really powerful one. But apart from that, that is pretty much everything to do with the superpower variant, again, air quotes. The last thing that I really just briefly want to cover, I'm not even going to properly cover it here, is this is basically the cards that you use for the cop and the mafia situation. Every player would get a gangster card and one person would be the cop, and then you're basically deciding at the end of each round, you basically pass round this card here, which is basically the cops have been called or they've not been called. Basically, it starts off face down and then it passes around each player, and then the cop can choose to basically turn it over and pass it on to the next player. The problem that I have with this is that it kind of relies maybe a bit too much on the honor system. So if you were to notice that a player has basically passed this to you from under the desk, and it was turning up like that, you would kind of have to go on the honor system that someone's not going to quickly just turn it back over and pass it on to the next player. It tends to break down if that happens. It really, and that's kind of why I don't like it. It just kind of, I think, adds an unnecessary step. If you like playing with this, or if that sounds kind of interesting, then go for it. But for me, it's not really a huge fan of it, to be honest. And that is how you play Cash and Guns. As I said at the start, there is a Yakuza expansion, in addition to a real-life variant called Cash and Guns Live, which can handle massive groups of people. You're talking about 15 or 20 people if you get the right group of people together, and everyone knows what they're doing. It can be an absolute blast. Haven't played it personally, but there are a couple of videos online that you should probably check out just to see what it looks like. And with that, I will close by saying thank you very much for watching. I hope that you've been intrigued enough to perhaps try and seek out a copy of this game. I did have to order this from abroad via Amazon because they were completely sold out in the normal stores, but I would say if you can find a copy of it, I would probably try and get it, because it can be an absolute blast if you get the right group of people. I can't guarantee that this game will be a game that you want to bring out every week with your friends. You might play it maybe once every couple of months, or you might bring it out during the holiday season when you want to vent your aggression or anything like that without doing too much damage. But I would say if you get the right group of friends together, maybe a bit of alcohol, maybe a lot, it can be a blast. So again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, see you then.